Good morning. I'm Jana McCamey, Executive Director of the Oregon Wine Growers Association. The OWA has been advocating for the Oregon wine industry for more than 4 decades and has been instrumental in supporting the industry's growth through encouraging sound policymaking on issues ranging from land use to taxation to direct shipping. We have more than 300 winery and grower members, both large and small, from all corners of the state. 2022 is a seismic year in Oregon politics with significant turnover in the state legislature, a new congressional seat, the retirement of a longstanding member of Congress, the defeat of another, and a three-way race for governor, among others. OWA does not make political endorsements, but we are focusing on three key races in our candidate town halls to help inform our industry about candidate positions on wine industry issues. These include the race for Oregon governor and the races for congressional districts 4 and 6. Today, we will be hearing from Commissioner Val Hoyle, who is hoping to replace longtime Congressman Peter DeFazio in Congressional District 4. We will start with a candidate statement followed by Q&A. We'll ask prepared questions of the candidate, and attendees can also bring questions forward during the town hall by typing them in the chat box. Please tailor your questions to topics impacting the Oregon wine industry. We'll try to ask as many of the live questions as we can in the time allotted. All attendees will remain on mute during the town hall. One other quick note is that it's an extremely busy time of year in the vineyard as we deal with the heat, and in the tasting room as we are at the height of our welcomed tourist season with ongoing staffing issues. Many in our industry are unable to join today, but are anxious to hear the candidates address wine industry topics. We are recording these sessions to ensure we reach a broad audience. Commissioner Val Hoyle is the Democratic nominee for the 4th Congressional District, which includes a lot of Oregon wine country, including the South Willamette Valley and southwestern part of the state. Commissioner Hoyle is the elected leader of the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries, which comes with the title of Labor Commissioner. She has served in that role since 2018. As Labor Commissioner, she has fought for the rights of Oregon workers and has cracked down on employers who exploit their workers and compete unfairly with responsible businesses. When Commissioner Hoyle served in the Oregon House, she ascended to the position of Majority Leader, the second most powerful position behind the Speaker. In the House, she successfully led efforts that benefited Oregon workers, climate change mitigation, healthcare, and ballot access. Commissioner Hoyle has lived in Lane County for over 20 years, along with her husband and 2 children. She has always been a supporter of the Oregon wine industry, and we welcome her here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So with all of that being said, that leaves me less to have to say in my opening statement. So I am currently Oregon's Labor Commissioner, and my approach there is built on what my background and my history is. I grew up in a union family. My father was president of his union. My grandfather was an immigrant who worked one of the founding members of the laborers union in New York. And and I worked for a union through high school in the hotel and restaurant industry. I then worked for 25 years in the private sector in the bicycle industry, in retail sales, retail management, manufacturing, distribution, and international trade. And that's what brought us out to Oregon. I was working for Trek Bicycles in the Midwest, and it was just really too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, and I wanted to go somewhere else. So we came to Oregon on the basis of the reputation of the school district and the quality of life, because my husband wanted to live in the middle of nowhere and I wanted to live in a city. So Eugene, Oregon was perfect. And then got involved in community activism, just trying to get better schools for my kids after finding out about Measure 5 and disinvestment in education. So that's what led me to run for office when a position came open in the legislature. Before I was in the legislature here in Oregon, I worked for Burley Design. It was a worker-owned cooperative that made bicycle trailers, and I was a founding member of the Eugene Chamber's International Roundtable to help small businesses expand international trade. I also served as the chairperson and a member of the Export Council of Oregon for 7 years before I got in the legislature, and worked with the United Way on our healthcare access program before the Affordable Care Act, because in Lane County, 21% of residents in Lane County were not insured previous to the Affordable Care Act. So when I got into the legislature, I felt like my job was to be a voice in the Democratic caucus, which is predominantly from the Portland metro area, for downstate, for areas that are outside of the metro area. I represented Junction City and West Eugene. So it's sort of a microcosm of what the 4th Congressional District is like. Some very conservative people, some very liberal people, and a whole bunch of people that just really want to get by and have good jobs and, you know, be able to have a better life for their kids. So being able to approach problem solving where I truly believe you don't have to be anti-business to be pro-worker. Like, good businesses who are following the rules and providing jobs should be supported, and you shouldn't have to compete with bad actors. And also protecting workers is something that all of us want to do. So that was my approach in the legislature, really focus on problem solving, working across the political spectrum, because that was my district. And as labor commissioner, I've done much the same thing, which is why I've gotten support from across the spectrum for both my job as labor commissioner and for my congressional race. I decided to run for Congress, even though I do love my job as labor commissioner. I really, really love that job. But Congressman DeFazio called and said he was going to be stepping down, retiring, and encouraged me to run and to think about it. And I do think that Washington's broken. I do think that we're on the verge of potentially losing our democracy. And we need people who can fight for what's right, are willing to stand up and get things done. I have the experience in a legislative body. I have the experience in the private sector. I have the experience as a union member, that I can work with people on all sides. But most importantly, we have benefited for 36 years of having a really strong voice for Oregon, but specifically for this district, which, by the way, is Curry County, Coos County, Douglas County out to Roseburg, all of Lane, all of Benton, and all of Lincoln, and about 1,000 people in Lynn County, just over the Benton County border. This district is 20% of the acreage for wine growers and producers in the state. So the wine industry is really important. And I've worked with many of you over the years, both in public policy and then, you know, just in supporting our local communities, because you are always the first ones to step up. I would love to have your, you know, I know you don't endorse candidates, but I'd love to make sure that we maintain an open and strong collaborative working relationship. That's, I guess, that.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for that statement. And yes, we have had a great opportunity to work with you over these great number of years. And I like that statistic of 20% in your district. That was homework you did on your own, all of that. So as you already know, Oregon wine is a signature product of our state. What do you like to tell your friends and family about the Oregon wine industry, especially if they're visiting here for the first time? And I don't even need to ask you if you've had the opportunity to visit an Oregon winery, because I know you have.
Many. You know, I bring my friends to the Oregon wineries, and I mean, I don't think there's anything better than Oregon wine. Certainly, I'm a Pinot fan. I like to bring friends because I grew up in the Northeast, so I did not grow up in an area with a whole hell of a lot of agriculture. So bringing them to wineries and being able to talk about the process that we went through in the legislature to allow, you know, wineries to serve food so that we can really make this a tourist experience, right? Like, have people experience wine with food. And it just is truly shows what we are, whether it's food to table or, you know, being able to look at the wineries where the grapes are picked. It's stunning and beautiful. So for me, I don't care where I am. I'm like, where is your Oregon wine list? And then I brag about Oregon. We actually did have actually Justin King was there, and Congressman Ted Lieu. We had a wine tasting battle between California and Oregon. And so we did Oregon Pinot. They, of course, were not going to bring a Pinot. They brought a cab, but we won. I'm just saying.
Well, that's great. I think having a good understanding of our industry is important since it's so complex, and to understand the value added nature of the business, and that it's agriculture and manufacturing and hospitality and alcohol shipping. That really helps to have a base understanding of how the industry works. So if you're elected to Congress, which committee assignments would you ideally receive, and which issues would you champion in your first term that could benefit Oregon's wine industry? And you are replacing a longstanding member of Congress potentially. How would you maximize your influence as a new member?
So first of all, having been in a legislative body, I recognize that as a new member, you don't have the same kind of sway that a 36-year member of Congress who's chair of a major committee has. So understanding that, we do have a delegation that works together very well, and each person in the delegation has an area of expertise. Congressman DeFazio, so I would like to serve on transportation and infrastructure, because we have benefited from the fact that Congressman DeFazio was on the T&I committee. And with the infrastructure bill, there is a lot of spending, whether it is the container port in Coos Bay and the upgrades to rail that will let us get our products to market quicker, easier, and reduce the supply chain congestion 7 to 10% on the West Coast. That's a big deal, right? But we need to make sure that that money comes in and is invested properly to upgrading, the dam in Newport, so we don't, wash out 101 and lose, a quarter of their houses, or basic maintenance of roads and bridges, right? Like, this used to not be a partisan issue. And yet we're at the place where the 11 Republicans that voted for the infrastructure package, were threatened with losing their committee positions, right? That's crazy. So I'm hoping that I could be on T&I and work in a bipartisan way to make sure we're investing in our infrastructure. It's really important. The second is the Ag Committee. I think it mentions in your questionnaire, there is a farm bill that's being worked on that will come out in 2023. Agriculture is a huge part of the 4th congressional district, right? And also really critical to our economy. But in Oregon, unlike in other states, we are predominantly family farms. And as you know, right, your wineries and suppliers, I mean, you sell, what is it, less than, but the majority, 90%.
5,000 cases or
5,000 cases, yeah. And so that's, it's indicative of the fact that we have a very different footprint than California, which is mostly large industrial farms, right? And larger wineries, or Washington, where it's, it's just, or Colorado, right? That we learned all of this. It came to the forefront in the ag overtime conversation. So I think, and specialty seeds, and certainly what you grow, right? Specialty growers need to have a voice in that process. Also, people don't understand, in the Ag Committee, that's where funding for broadband, right? Investments in broadband and a number of other, financial tools to actually, that would help Oregon, which is by geography predominantly rural. So I'd like that. And then third, small business. I've been a small business owner. 85% of Oregon businesses qualify as small businesses. So we are the place where people can come and be innovative and be a big fish in a small pond. But again, it's a very different landscape than other places. So Peter DeFazio will definitely put a word in so that we can continue having a voice on transportation and infrastructure. And the other ones, well, I'm a team player and I'll get what I get, but those are the key issues that I want to fight for.
Well, thank you for that. Yes, certainly those are really important committees. Like many other sectors of Oregon ag, climate change is impacting Oregon wine grape growing in really appreciable ways, from wildfire smoke to lack of available water for irrigation and a growing need to irrigate, to extreme heat events, unseasonable frost, new pests. What actions should Congress take to combat climate change and ease the burden on Oregon's agricultural producers?
So climate, we have a climate crisis, and I live out in an area where we were evacuated. I was co-chair of the Wildfire Recovery Council with Tobias Reed, and whether it's drought or heat or fires or crazy winter weather, right? This is a crisis. We can't deny it anymore. And I think every single bill that we have should be a climate bill. The other issue is water retention, ensuring that, you know, the crops we're growing fit the area that they're growing in. I know we need to move away from fossil fuels as quickly as possible. We need to do it in a way that acknowledges, like this district, the average per capita income is $31,000, and that's artificially high because of the two university towns, Corvallis and Eugene, right? So when we talk about how to address climate change and move to a fossil-free future, so often we forget about the workers, right? We forget about the fact that if you are trying to figure out how to pay for gas, rent, and food, you're probably not thinking about the global, you know, philosophy of the climate crisis, right? So we need practical solutions that work for people, whether it's on the coast or it's, you know, inland here. And again, because in the Pacific Northwest, we have so much, you know, forest land and agricultural land, I think it's a critical issue. So I think every single bill we pass, we need to look at how we move towards a fossil fuel free future and how we preserve the resources we have.
Thank you. Building on natural disasters, unfortunately, you know, Oregon wine growers are becoming more reliant on crop insurance, disaster assistance, federal investments in research funding. We've worked collaboratively with Oregon and Washington wine growers to get appropriations for smoke impact research. Do you support continued investment in these programs, more of these you know, things that help us deal with natural disasters? And are there other programs that you would support to assist with, you know, adaptation for agriculture? Because, you know, again, this is something that we're really facing as an industry over the last more, you know, 3 to 4 years, and, you know, in parts of your district in Southern Oregon for, you know, 10 years.
Right. So again, agriculture is a critical part of our economy, whether it's, you know, wine growers or nurseries or, you know, farmers, or again, specialty seed in the Willamette Valley, really important. So we need to do what we can to protect this part of our economy and ensure that we're supporting you in adapting to what the new normal is, right? Which means adapting what you grow, means protecting and making sure if you're going to take the risk, right, to put everything on the line, to plant a crop, to, you know, be an important part of our economy and our value added economy, then we need to make sure that there are protections for you to be able to do that. Otherwise, we will lose this industry, and we'll lose the stewardship that people who work in agriculture bring to how they treat their land. So that's a very long, wordy way to say, yeah, I would ask you, because I'm not an expert. I would come to you. I would do what I've done the entire time I've been in office, which is go to the people that are affected and say, what do we need to do? And what's the best tool for this?
I think that raises a good point too, you know, just for the folks that are tuning in, you know, OWA, we don't have a lobbyist in DC. You know, we maximize our relationships with national organizations and with our congressional delegations to really alert us to issues that are coming down the line. We have a very strong relationship with the congressional delegation who will come to us and ask for input. So that's it's really important for us to be able to work together. Since we're talking about, you know, Farm Bill, you know, specialty crop provisions are incredibly valuable, and really those funding levels have remained consistent while specialty crop production has expanded. A lot of these programs were designed for, you know, commodity agriculture, and, you know, wine is under the specialty crop category. Development of the Farm Bill for next Farm Bill is underway, as you mentioned. Do you have thoughts on how you would reimagine the Farm Bill to better address the needs of specialty crop producers in the future? Because again, those funding levels have really remained consistent, whether it's for specialty crop block grants, for specialty crop research initiative, market access program, really things that help us build our markets and fund important research for our industry.
So this is something I've actually been talking with some people at OSU about, right? And also the U of O, but specifically funding for research, right? So that we can do what we do better with both better outcomes and less impact, right? And whether that be research or funding our tax credits for mechanization where appropriate so that we can catch up with what they're doing in Europe or, California, right? I think that it is important for us to make those investments. And again, because the profile of what we do is unique in the country, we need to have a voice at the table because part of the issue, and this is a complete, I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but not a lot. Part of the problem with not having a presidential primary that is rotating, you've got a presidential primary in Iowa. So everybody's, they care a lot about the crops that they grow in Iowa and the way they grow crops in Iowa, right? Or New Hampshire, which again, not like us, or South Carolina. And so the Pacific Northwest, our issues don't tend to be on the forefront of the political, whatever, what people are doing every 4 years or every 2 years. But I think the people here who've worked with me can tell you I both have a loud voice, I mean, both like literally and figuratively. And I'm very persistent in getting my message across. And that's what I would do for this district. That's what I did when I was in the legislature. Again, didn't come from an agricultural area growing up, but represented an area with a lot of specialty seed farmers and maintained a really good working relationship. I think the best comment that I heard was somebody went to a friend of mine and said, gosh, Val's been great. And she checks in with us and she's available for Democrat. This is really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that.
Well, you mentioned something interesting there around the, mechanization tax credits. We are looking at labor costs for our industry soaring for a variety of reasons. And this reality is compounded by workforce shortages for positions fundamental to grape growing and, wine production and sales. And there's high turnover and reliability issues with the tight labor market. Is there anything Congress can do to expand the qualified labor pool for hospitality and ag, or other things like you mentioned, tax credits for mechanization, and research into mechanization?
So I think it's a both and, right? We need to invest in helping agriculture mechanize because one, it is labor costs, but it is about market competitiveness. I mean, we do have a higher minimum wage, and this is with the ag overtime bill. One of the things I tried to get my colleagues to understand was any kind of a tax credit should be tied to our competitive market, where we stand in the market competitively versus other states that have lower minimum wages, right? So as opposed to this being like, we're going to give you a subsidy for doing the right thing. There's an actual market. Now, we're competing with Europe, we're competing with other states. I think mechanization is important, can make us efficient, and also makes it so that the workers that you have are the ones that are doing the most specialized work, right? So tax credits for mechanization. And I think there are a number of things that we can do in terms of workforce. I am a big, I don't think I can have a conversation for any length of time without talking about apprenticeship, but for the 50% of jobs that need more than a high school degree and less than a college degree, an apprenticeship model, right, where you have an industry standard, and it can be anything, right? Paid supervised on-the-job training and certified classroom instruction, a certified apprenticeship program can really get people into careers. So I'm working with like the Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association has a number of different classes and pathways. And I think young people now who are graduating from high school, right? And they haven't gotten the soft skills because they haven't been in school, haven't done sports and the classes, you know, the clubs that you normally would do, really benefit from this type of learning. Also, they can get a certification without college debt. So that's part of it. And then the other part is the I word, is immigration reform. We need comprehensive immigration reform. In '85, I worked with my congressman when I was in college in Massachusetts on the last comprehensive immigration reform bill. And that was bipartisan. And it should be bipartisan. Unfortunately, and the conversation is very different on the East Coast and the Northeast, because most of the immigrants there were Irish, Russian, or Polish, right? They were white immigrants. And so it takes on a way different tone, and it's a different conversation. It is disappointing that politics and quite frankly, racist attacks have gotten in the way of us addressing a real issue, which is we have workforce needs, and whether it's our H-2A visas, right? Because in Oregon, we don't utilize that program a whole lot, or making sure that we have a proper, worker visa program that allows people to come here and then go back home, because that strengthens their economy, it strengthens our economy, it improves our national security. But it's hard to have that conversation because it's gotten overly politicized. My grandfather is an immigrant, my husband's an immigrant. I think this country does better when we have policies on immigration that recognize national security, that protect, refugees, and ensure that the people that come here are people that are interested in the best interest of our country. And so I know that you're very supportive of that, whether it was working on driver's cards. I worked on that in the legislature with many of the people in the wine industry. I don't know how we fix it because the brand has gotten so toxic, but I think it's irresponsible to point to problems with immigration and, coming up with things like build a wall. That doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't address the issue, and it doesn't take care of our workforce needs. So apprenticeship, comprehensive immigration reform, tax credits for mechanization, and letting young people know that there are really good paying careers here in Oregon, in this industry where, I think we do what we do better than anyone else. And so getting that kind of certification can allow them to be successful, anywhere in the world.
Well, thank you. Yes, we have producers of different sizes and business types here, so mechanization isn't always a fit for everyone. So having a multi-pronged approach to try to increase labor availability is important. One issue that came up from someone who registered for the forum was around workforce housing. Also, for the hospitality side, because you have a mismatch between pay and being able to afford, food, shelter, and gas. Is there anything to be done on the workforce housing front?
So this is on the coast. I was talking to Pacific Seafood, and they said their issue in getting workers is not about pay. It's about housing, right? And so they're building workforce housing. But I think when we think of workforce housing, we think of sort of old style farm worker housing. I know in the legislature, because a lot of this happens at the state and local level, they worked in Bend to DSL gave some land. It was this public-private partnership of many different entities and or different municipalities where they put aside land specifically for teachers to have housing and, service workers on the coast. Just as you all know, getting people who work in the service industry to be able to afford to live where they work is really a struggle. So I do think there can be federal investments. I think we need to make federal investments because housing prices they're out of control. And quite frankly, I think we need to build more housing. There's a way to build more housing without building on farmland or overriding the protections that we as Oregonians have put into place to protect our rich farmland. But, you either got to grow up or out. And we have to deal with the fact that it is not just an Oregon problem. It is a national problem. The federal government should invest in solutions, working with the state, working with municipalities that work for each different area. What works in Newport is different than what works in Lane County, is different than what works in John Day. But I will tell you, a friend of mine has a ranch out between John Day and Burns, and he had to build worker housing because there wasn't enough housing between John Day and Burns. So this is not an urban problem exclusively. This is a problem throughout. And I think we have to, stop just talking about it and actually put resources into doing something.
Thank you. This is shifting gears quite a bit, but an important issue for our industry. Our tasting rooms are extremely reliant on direct to consumer sales to get wine in the hands of consumers around the country. They take responsible service and delivery of wine very seriously. And so while it's primarily a state issue due to the repeal of prohibition, what are your views on expanding avenues for wine to get in the hands of drinking age consumers, such as through the United States Postal Service Shipping Act, which is, under consideration in Congress currently?
So I actually was talking with the Postal Workers Union about this as well, and they're very supportive of it. Look, I think it's a great idea as long as we have protections to ensure that underage people aren't getting a hold of it. But honestly, underage drinkers aren't generally buying, nice bottles of wine. I mean, not in the neighborhood I grew up in anyway, right? So I think that we need to do more to expand because of the sort of craft nature of what we do. Oregon wines have an incredible brand, and we should do everything that we can to make sure that we can get that into the hands of consumers who think Oregon's great. And it helps our economy, which pays more taxes, which means we have better schools. I mean, it's a win-win. Also, people get good wine.
Yes, that's very, very true. Okay, well, another federal issue. So in December of 2020, Congress made permanent expanded excise tax credits for wine producers and also raised the alcohol by volume rate from 14 to 16% when a higher tax is owed. That's also climate change is pushing up those ABVs, sometimes with warmer vintages. This was an effort that we worked closely with Senator Wyden on for a number of years to get passed. And so it was really important that that was made permanent at the end of 2020. Do you support, tax policies that allow wine businesses to reinvest in operations and workers? Would you support that those continued tax credits?
Absolutely.
Great. So inflation, we are all, seeing this in all sectors of our economy and our daily lives, along with supply chain bottlenecks. Inflation is driving up costs of wine industry inputs, whether it's glass bottles, fuels, fertilizer, vineyard winery equipment, and supplies are often on long delays as well. Is there anything that can be done at the federal level to support accessing materials and equipment for the industry to remain viable, efforts working with the state to try to assist?
Yeah, I think we need to do everything possible. And again, the demographics of this district with a lot of people that are living on the edge, right? Really important to address inflation. Now, we all know this is an international issue and but when you're talking to someone who's like, how do I pay for rent, food, and gas? Like, I don't want to hear about the international nature and we're doing better than Europe. It doesn't matter, right? This is where I'm incredibly frustrated at the hyper-partisan nature of our federal government, in that we all just need to put our heads down and get to work. I am grateful that it looks like, so first of all, the president has taken seriously the focus to bring down gas prices, because whether that's fertilizer or diesel or, gas prices, like, that's important. And he's done that, right? He's actually worked and done that, and taken some hard steps. It looks like, Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer have come to agreement on a package that will work to lower inflation, make the kind of investments, reduce the deficit. Again, that was a bill that wasn't going to be passed because, Mitch McConnell didn't want to give anyone a win before the 2022 elections. That's wrong. We need to address this. This is critical, and it's too important to play politics with. I think we need to work with states, local municipalities, do everything that we can with the tools of the federal government to bring inflation under control. In terms of supply chain issues, what we need to do is bring manufacturing back to the United States. And I've been working, when I was with the Wildfire Recovery Council, with the Department of Commerce on bringing back manufacturing. We were looking at building modular homes, and we couldn't find trusses, right? Like, as a really important part of framing a house, because we'd offshored all of those jobs because it costs less. Well, it doesn't cost less if we can't get the materials that we need. So I think bringing manufacturing here, and then the other thing, which will benefit all of you, is ensuring that we follow through with the investment on that port in Coos Bay. Again, 7 to 10% reduction in the supply chain congestion on the West Coast, meaning you all can put your goods on a train from here, have it go directly to the port, and container ships can come in right off the ocean, as opposed to up in Portland where they have to go down the Columbia. It's a full day thing, right? This is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for 6,000 to 7,000 jobs between Douglas, Coos, and Lane County, and is really, really important work, which brings me back to infrastructure needs to be bipartisan and nonpartisan, and something we all think about. How do we invest to make things better?
Great. Yes. Very important response there. One other, thing that we talked about on the federal side is, tariffs on our products getting to markets. And
Yeah.
the Trans-Pacific Partnership would have seen those tariffs go down in a lot of important markets, but that ultimately didn't move forward. How would you support kind of reinvesting in those conversations around reducing trade barriers so that we can grow our export potential as an industry and compete on a more level playing field?
So, as I said, my background is international trade. And I worked with small businesses throughout Oregon to help them understand that shipping internationally is not really complicated. Like, it feels big, and you can have a bigger pie as opposed to just trying to take a bigger part of this pie. You should always try and have more pie. Everyone should have more pie. But my position on trade has always been to ensure that whatever trade policies we pass have protections for workers and the environment. If we're going to pass a trade deal where we're lowering tariffs and barriers to a country that is using enslaved labor and decimating the environment, right? And then our goods can compete without taxes. I mean, that's not fair competition. So I think that trade provisions are important. I think that we need to look at the fact that in many other countries, there's subsidies for their industries that we don't get. And that isn't fair competition. So I want to see us do whatever we can to expand export. In the 2009 recession, the only sector of Oregon's economy that didn't decrease and in fact grew were exports. And that saved us, absolutely saved us. I mean, it was devastating, but it would have been so much worse. So we actually do a tremendous job with exports. And I want to encourage this sector of our economy because Oregon has a great brand. When I would sell into Europe, I had my company change their logo, like, because it used to have just an American flag. and we put in Oregon, like the state of Oregon, and that brand is real and it's great. And we're not going to compete on the lowest price, but the bottom line is I support trade agreements, and I support trade agreements that are fair.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Yes, Oregon is very dependent on export, and we do hope that our industry over time can grow its reach into international markets. And that's some of that Farm Bill funding is so important for market access development, which funds the Oregon Wine Board's efforts. Well, this has been a really excellent conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to share with the group? You can also share, information on how to learn more about your campaign.
So my campaign, you can go to, I'll just put this in here, www.valhoyle.com. We've got a strong campaign, and although this is a difficult year for Democrats because it's an off election cycle, I have the benefit of having support from Democrats, independents, and Republicans, which is really the only way to win this district. I come from Lane County. This will be my 7th competitive race in the district. And I've earned the support of a lot of people by showing up and being able to work to solve problems. I want to have a continued strong working relationship with the wine industry, and I expect that this will be a hard fought campaign, and I do expect to win. All indications are that I'll win if I don't screw it up. I don't plan to, but it will be a really hard fight. So for any of you that would love to support me, I would love to get that support, but most importantly, I want to maintain this relationship.
Thank you. And just to note, we have invited the Republican candidate for Congressional District 4, Alex Scarlatos, to present to the industry as well. We have not gotten a response, but just so folks know that we have invited both candidates. Thank you so much, Commissioner Hoyle, for all of your excellent responses and for the work that you have done in the legislature. And as BOLI Commissioner, we look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
All right, thank you. And I will note that we will be doing rulemaking on ag overtime, and we will definitely be including your voice at the table on that because it's critical and important. There's already been a few issues. Sorry to take some time.
No, this is great. Yeah.
With people who are in supervisory positions that are making they're making over $70,000, but under the terms and the way the law is written, they also because they drive a tractor or they do this thing, and there was some very specific things. So we're going to try and work with the wording to make sure that it addresses the people that it should address. But just know nothing will happen. We will have a transparent public process and outreach to all key stakeholders.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who joined us.
Okay. Take care.
Best of luck. Bye-bye.
Bye.